Hello, and welcome again to a Wednesday segment at Dojo Live, sponsored by Ancora. This is Ram Ganesan, your friendly host, dialed in from New Jersey, and I'm joined by Tulio Saragosa, my partner and co-host from Los Angeles, California. And today's esteemed guest is Amit Agarwal, founder and CTO of the Yes. That's a really positive name. I like to say the Yes. And the title and the topic of our discussion is growing a successful team and building tech within a startup. So welcome, Amit. This is your show. Why don't we start with a little more detail and getting to know you better? So Amit, I've known him for a couple of years now. Is the real deal. He's the real deal from Silicon Valley. He's been through multiple successful startups, and now his latest venture is the Yes. So Amit, over to you.
Thank you, Ram. Really excited and looking forward to our conversation today. Just a little bit about myself. The way I think about myself is I'm someone who really loves working at the intersection of technology, product, and people. And what I mean by that is that, over the course of my career, what I've realized is that I love building cool technology, but I love building technology that's at the core of solving a consumer problem, a customer problem, and it's really focused on a product. And I love building technology with small teams of people, not huge teams, but small teams. And so kind of that's the intersection that I've been at. And I worked, as Ram mentioned, I've worked at a number of small companies. Before starting the Yes, I was at a startup called Bloomreach, where I worked very closely with Ram. We worked together, and so, I've had startup experience. I worked at Groupon, which was a very small company when I joined it. And I've also worked at big companies like Google and Microsoft, and had a great time doing that. My passion over the years has been really leveraging AI and machine learning to build great consumer experiences, which is what we're doing at the Yes.
That's great. So tell us a little more about the Yes, and how did you arrive at the brand name called the Yes? That sounds interesting on its own.
Yeah. Let me first talk about the Yes, and then we'll come to the branding. So the thesis behind the Yes is actually really simple, which is the shopping experience as we know it today hasn't really changed over the last 20 years, and it's very static and one size fits all, which basically means that if you go to any online shopping experience, it's the same for you and me. For the most part, there's a little bit of personalization built in, but really at the core level, the experience is the same. And also the experience is very static. It doesn't change over time. It doesn't learn from me. It doesn't adjust to what I'm thinking about. Consumers over the last 5 to 10 years have kind of become accustomed to things like Google News or Spotify in the domain of music. And those experiences, if you think about it, are very personalized and very dynamic. So your Google News feed is really personalized to you. It understands where you live, so it's giving you local news. It understands whether you're a sports fan or not, and gives you sports news. And it's also adjusting and learning. And the same thing is true for Spotify and your in your feed there. And so our starting thesis was that consumers have become used to those kinds of personalized and dynamic experiences, and that those same experiences can be brought to shopping, and that we believe that we can build the technology to make that happen. And so that's sort of the central thesis of the Yes. And the branding of the Yes, a lot of that credit goes to my co-founder, Julie. But the branding reflects the positive nature of what we're trying to build. It's kind of this idea that you have a really personalized experience, and you come to that and you say, yes, that's what I was looking for. This is my feed. This is my store. And so it's that kind of idea of creating that positive, inspirational emotion in the shopping experience, and moving it away from what today is fairly hard and cumbersome. You go to shop and you see lots and lots of products, and you have to go through them to figure out what you're looking for, versus an experience that's curated for you and inspires you and causes you to say yes.
That's amazing. One of the simplest words, yes, but such a positive connotation to it, and the fact that you came upon that with your brand identity is just amazing. So thanks for sharing that.
And
Uh,
one of the things that I would add to that is that the it's kind of part of the name of the company and the name of the product, but it actually is very deeply embedded in the product. So it's not just a brand name that we use to name the company, but if you go play around with the product, we have this concept of you can give feedback to us by saying if you like a product, you say yes. So every product that we show on the app has a button with a yes on it. And so that branding is deeply embedded in the product, which is also, we're really excited about that.
so that's amazing. So if I were working at your company and I just come to you and ask you for a raise, you just say yes, right?
Uh, well,
Just
yes.
kidding.
Yeah.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about your tech journey, right? Because your official role is CTO. You mentioned that you worked at Google in the past and you've learned, how they personalize and tailor content. Sometimes it gets a little scary, but they do a very good job of it. So you've learned
Yeah.
some of that working with the best there at Google, and I know you very well from our joint work experience at Bloomreach. Tell us how you're applying those learnings here at the Yes for a shopping experience for fashion and retail.
Yeah. There's been, I worked at Groupon, Google, Bloomreach. Bloomreach was another company that actually built sort of this personalization platform, selling to other brands and retailers. And through that journey, there's been a lot of kind of learning. I would say maybe just keeping it really high level, the two key learnings for me have been number one, that in order to build a great personalization experience, that you have to go deep into the domain. That it is very hard to build a personalization experience that spans clothing and fashion and furniture and commodities and TVs. That's just really hard. And so you really have to go understand the specific domain to do something very deep and engaging for the customer. That's what, for example, Spotify and Pandora do for music. So that's number one.
Got
And
it.
number two, learning has been that you really want to think about the problem end to end. You don't want to just think about the AI and the machine learning and the algorithm in isolation. You want to kind of connect it to the user experience. And those two principles have guided us through this journey at the Yes, which is number one, we're going really deep into shopping, and more specifically, we're going really deep into fashion and clothing, because we believe that's the right approach to personalization. You need to understand the domain. For example, in the case of fashion, you want to understand style, you want to understand price point, you want to understand sizing and fit. And number two, we're building an end-to-end consumer product. So not only do we think about the algorithm and the AI, but we also think about the user experience and how to connect the two. So those have been two kind of main learnings that we've applied to the Yes.
Fantastic. And tell us a little more about, how did you go about building that tech engine? You did mention it early on that you're at the intersection of technology, product, and people. Give us a little more color about how did you go about building this team?
Yeah, so when we started, just like when you're starting a company, it's a clean canvas. One of the most exciting things about starting a company is you have 0 lines of code, you have no product. You probably just have a slide deck, and that's about it. And so the first thing that you have to decide is what are you going to build? What are the key pillars of what you're going to build? Where are you going to differentiate? What are you going to focus on? What is your core differentiation? And so earlier on in the product, we came up with 3 areas that we thought needed to be built. We call these the 3 legs of our stool or a platform. Number one, if we're going to build an e-commerce end-to-end shopping experience, we needed a lot of inventory. And so we needed to build the technology to integrate with brands, both to get their data, to place orders, and so on. So that was one leg of the stool. Without the inventory and the products to sell, we wouldn't be able to build an experience. And we wanted to kind of really innovate on that. It's really hard today to integrate with brands, and so we wanted to spend a lot of time kind of really thinking differently about that space. So that was number one. Number two was this idea of building a really deep personalization algorithm that relies on content. So really deeply understand fashion and style using AI and machine learning. So that was the second pillar. And the third pillar was the user experience, building the app, which kind of changed the experience for the user. So we had these three areas, and every company is different. In some companies you have one core area of differentiation, in some companies you have two, in some companies it's actually not the technology or the product that is the core differentiation, it's the business model. In our case, it was these three pillars of the technology stack that we needed to really build in order to build the product and the company. And so we started building all three in parallel, which is kind of unusual for a startup. But that's what we needed, and we started with really, really small teams, 1 or 2 engineers on each of these three things. Our goal was to build a prototype really quickly that we could play around with internally and refine on it. And so we started working on all three in parallel with really small teams that were moving really fast. And then the next phase was, once we had a basic product that we internally could play around with, was to get alpha testers actually to play with the product, give us feedback and iterate. And so that's how we started, building these three areas, building small teams, building an end-to-end product, and then getting into this loop of quick iteration, which is really important for a startup.
And I love the point, and love the point that you mentioned about how embedded the user experience. Without solid UI UX, technology as in on itself doesn't succeed, especially in today's day and age. And you're talking about building a consumer-facing app, right? So that design and technology is really that alignment that you need, and they really go hand in hand. One is not superior to the other, I think, but combined they form a very powerful solution. In terms of today's day and age of remote hiring, how is your team? Do you prefer having them all in one office? Are they distributed? How do you go about your hiring? And did any of 2020's challenges kind of change how you started looking at tech hiring?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's a area where our thinking is kind of evolving, and I don't think I have a good answer. I think this is a topic that we're thinking very deeply of. I think just to give you a sense of the team makeup, I think when we started, our goal was to hire the right team, the best possible team. And we actually, even before COVID, even pre-COVID, about 25% of our engineering team was remote. And the way it kind of evolved was that the reason it was 25% was remote was our focus on hiring was all in the Bay Area. But when we found the right people outside the Bay Area, we still hired them. A lot of them were through past connections, people I had worked with or other people in the team had worked with and really knew and trusted. And we just kind of hired those people because it was more important for us to have the right people that we trusted, that we knew, than having them all in one location. I think COVID has changed a lot of things. I think COVID has shown us that there's remote work can work with the right setup, but it has also shown us that there are some gaps. What's missing with the Zoom culture is this ad hoc brainstorming sessions where you start with a really, really ad hoc idea, brainstorm on it, and refine the idea interactively. That kind of interaction doesn't happen in this remote world. And so what we're thinking of, and we don't have a good answer to it, is how do you combine the best of both worlds? How do you combine the kind of ad hoc innovation that comes with working together in the same office, and the sort of also the social interaction, which is really useful, along with the efficiency that comes with working remotely and not having a commute. And so we don't have a good answer. I think all companies are thinking about it, including ourselves.
So Amit,
the commute is one thing I don't miss. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I have a question. I want to take us back a little bit to the conversation we just had around balancing function versus the design, right? So I often think about the design is really about adoption, whereas the tech is about functionality. And you have to have the functionality to deliver the value, but without the adoption, you can have the most amazing technology in the world. You're not going to get anywhere. So how are you guys balancing that?
Balancing adoption and technology.
Right, balancing the design, the user experience with the tech. How are you balancing? How are you striking the balance between delivering the high value, but also enabling the adoption for it to be easy to use?
Yeah, well, to me, those two are really, really connected. The design and the technology are really connected. I think, one of the ways we're different is most companies think of them very differently. We think of them together. In other words, the goal, for example, if you think about personalization, the goal of personalization to me is not to bring the best product in front of you. That's not the goal. The goal of personalization to some extent is to have this conversation with the consumer or the user of your product, where the user of your product feels heard. They feel like the product is listening to them. Like, it doesn't always have to get it perfect, but at least the product is listening and adjusting and learning. To some extent, that's more even primary goal of personalization in my mind. So to me, the two are really, really interconnected. It's not even a trade-off. So the way we balance the two is that typically when you're solving an AI problem, you have to start with the end consumer problem. You have to start with the consumer experience. You will have to start with what is the problem you're solving for the consumer, and then work backwards towards the AI solution, rather than the other way around, where you start with the AI technology and try to put it in front of the user. So I think this idea of kind of working backwards from the consumer problem and solving it with AI is a good starting point to help strike that balance.
So how are you structuring that? Do you have a separate team of designers, or do you look for engineers that have design experience? How are you striking that at the execution level with the people you have on your team?
Yeah, I think we're big believers in cross-functional teams, and so typically, if you think about our AI team, that AI team has engineers who are AI machine learning engineers, but also a product manager who understands AI, but also understands the consumer and the consumer experience. And together, that team owns the goals. And so, having small cross-functional teams has been a great asset for us. We also, for example, will build cross-functional teams that have a machine learning engineer with a front-end engineer, a designer, and a product manager, focused on a really end-to-end problem. And I think that's one of the, again, when I say combining AI and UI, that's one of the key things, is you have to bring these different functions, these different skill sets together to really build a great product.
So I have one more question, and I'll hand it back to Ram. You said earlier that the way you get adoption is by listening to the consumer, taking in their input, understanding what their needs are, and then, of course, delivering on those needs. How are you guys doing that? Do you have a validation process to engage with consumers? Do you have a group of people that you engage with? How are you guys effectively doing that today?
Yeah, you use multiple techniques. You use data. So we have enough users at this point that we can actually, if you come up with a hypothesis or an idea or a feature, we can build a quick prototype, do an A/B test, and collect data. So that's one way. The second way is we have internal users, and they give us a lot of valuable feedback on initial ideas and hypotheses. And then you also go to external customers, beta users, and get feedback on future ideas. So I don't think there's a perfect answer, but you use a combination of all three of these things to get sort of validation of features and ideas.
Great, thanks.
So let's go in a slightly different direction here, right? So Ahmed, the Yes uh, sells a lot of the high-end fashion brands, and you work with pretty much the who's who of the industry, right, in terms of brands and product lines. How has it been to deal with these brands? How have you integrated with each of them? Have you created something new? Are you using some of the old processes? Is that something that you're looking to revolutionize with the Yes integration model? Talk to
Yeah.
us a little about that.
Yeah, as I said, absolutely, that's one of the things that we want to be different on. I talked about the consumer value proposition for the Yes, which is this highly personalized, curated experience. But a big part of the value of the Yes is our value proposition for the brands. So, as far as the brands is concerned, what we say is that this is a new platform that is really friendly to the brands. Just as an example, some of the examples of the way we're brand friendly. We use the brand's imagery and the brand's styling on our platform. We don't shoot our own images or model images. We also, our promise to the brands is that the integration will not, they don't have to do much work at all, that it is fully automated and all of the work is on our side. So we built a whole platform with that basic assumption that it should be really almost no work for the brand to integrate with us. If you start with that thesis that it should be zero work for the brand, you have to really build a very deep technology in order to make that happen. So we have very advanced technology to ingest data. As an example, we don't ask any brand to put the data in any format or any taxonomy. We just ingest the images of the product and the description of the product, and everything else we automatically infer using machine learning. So we don't ask the brand to say, hey, you have to tell us the category of the product based on this taxonomy. The brand just gives us the raw descriptions that they have on their website or the images that they already have, and everything else we infer automatically. So we have about, for example, 500 different attributes that we infer for every product. All of that is done automatically with no work from the brand. So really, we've rethought how brand integrations should work with the basic idea that there should be no work from the brand.
That's
I
great.
have one more question. I know we're getting close. It's in time, but I have one more question. So, building a team is challenging these days. You've got 5 or 6 openings for every one available good engineer, competing with some pretty big unicorns in the industry.
Yeah.
How do you go about attracting the right talent and then keeping them? Has that been a challenge for you guys? What are some of the intrinsic things that you've adopted that encourages folks to stay?
Yeah, I think we're, hiring great people is always a challenge because there's there's so much demand for great talent. But really, there is the core people who come to the Yes. The people that we've hired really care about what we're building. They really believe in the product that we're building. They believe in the business. They believe in the technology. They believe that that what we're building has a lot of value for consumers. It has a lot of business value. That there's a lot of interesting, challenging product and technology problems that they're solving. And so, everyone that we hire is bought into that. They come to the Yes because they want to be part of a startup. They want to have a lot of impact. And the main thing, that we focus on is creating that environment where they can have impact, where they can do their best work, where they can solve interesting problems, where they can grow, where they can, take on challenges outside their comfort zone. And in the process, build value for our consumers, because everyone understands that if we solve really hard problems and build value for the customer, that it is going to be, in the end, creating great value for all of us. So that's sort of what we do. And part of it goes to our hiring process. We obviously hire on the engineering team, as an example, we hire engineers who are really, really strong technically, but we also hire engineers who would really want to be at a startup. Being at a startup is really, really different than being at a big company. And not only do you have to be okay with it, you have to really enjoy it. So, as an example, when the first few engineers that we had 0 lines of code. You have to feel comfortable in that setting where there's no lines of code, no infrastructure. Not only do you have to feel comfortable, you have to really feel good about it, that I'm going to be the person making all of those decisions and learn in the process. And so that's sort of the people that we hire.
Great, thanks.
That's great. So how do you go about building something from nothing, right? Are there early decisions that you feel that are coming back to you and you need to fix it now? And are those heavy decisions, or is that really part and parcel of that process? Do you feel like it's something that can be controlled by better practices or better culture or some other methodologies? Because you've done this at several startups, right? So were you able to apply that knowledge, or did you make some mistakes that feel like, oh, I wish I'd thought of it this way now that I know better?
I'm sure there will be some that will kind of 6 months from now or a year from now.
It's
will
not fun otherwise, right? If you knew everything.
The one thing I would say is, never in our lifetimes technology has improved so fast. Like, the rate of improvement of technology is unprecedented. Like, whether if you think about infrastructure or AI, or take any field. And so what that means is it's never been easier to build things than it is today. And for example, one of the questions I get when we're hiring people is, well, you're a startup, you're 1 year, 2 years old. Do you have the right infrastructure to do great engineering work? And my response usually is, a company that started 1 year back, even though they've just had 1 year, is probably going to have better infrastructure than a company that's been around for 5 years. And the reason for that is that the company that started 5 years back, if they're not really on the cutting edge, has 5-year-old technology. And, we as a new startup have 1-year-old technology. So one of the things that we've kind of, we've used a few principles, based on this. Number one, technology is really moving really, really fast. And so when we hire, we're not looking for experts as much as we're looking for learners. And so that's a key thing that we've done.
I've heard that twice this week already. We're working with another prospect that's saying the same thing. I'm not looking for experts. I want people who have that open mind, will learn quickly, and will be quick to adapt to the changes here. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the important things. If I look back at my career, I would say, if I were to have a learning from that, something that I didn't do well, it was that I didn't adopt new technology fast enough. And it's really hard because it's changing so fast, and you have to spend the time to be on the cutting edge of technology. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. So one of the things that we've tried to build into the culture at the Yes is being really at the cutting edge, really moving along with the technology. And if you do that, I think you can stay ahead of the curve. The other thing that, a part of the culture that we want to build, and, I'm not saying we are always successful, is that you have to set a culture of moving fast and learning fast, which is, it's okay to make mistakes. I think every company will make mistakes. I think the goal should not be not to make mistakes, but the goal should be to learn fast and fix those mistakes really quickly. And so part of, as we set up the teams, we actually set them up so that we're with the explicit goal of learning. So like in both of these things, I think that the key thing is learning, whether it's technology trends or learning from mistakes quickly. And as you can't predict all the mistakes you'll make, all you can do is fix them fast.
Yeah, and I think more than technology, what you're really, I guess, touching on is a learning-based culture, and which I'm guessing is not just applying to technology, but several other things at the Yes. I think we're up on time. Amit, one last question quickly, if you can humor us and the audience. What's in store for 2021?
Yeah, we're really excited about 2021. So, I talked about these 3 pillars that we're building. The brand partnerships, and number 2, the machine learning personalization algorithms, and the number 3 is the app and the product and the consumer experience. I think we made a ton of progress on all 3. We have a very solid product, and I think 2021 for us is going to be really scaling and growing our user base, growing the product, improving the product. So we're really excited about 2021. We've done a lot of hard work over the last 2 years, building the core pieces of the platform and the technology and the product, and now it's really great to see it in the hands of users and seeing the vision coming to life that we've been working on for the last 2 years.
Awesome. And we are out of time. Once again, we were talking to Amit Agrawal, co-founder and CTO at The Yes, and we were discussing how to grow a successful team and building tech within a startup. Amit, thank you for your time. I'm joined by Tulio Siragusa in Los Angeles. This is Ram Ganesan from New Jersey, signing off, and I'll see you next Wednesday again on Dojo Live, sponsored by Encora.